So it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Dirk Schuster today. This is a public lecture for students and academics of the Philosophical Faculty of University Hradec Králové. But it is a, as I said, public lecture, so it is open to anyone who shall connect. It is my pleasure really to welcome Dr. Schuster here today with us. Dr. Schuster is an academic, a researcher who is normally based at the University of Vienna at the religious department, or Department of Religious Studies, I should be precise with that, and also at the University of Krems in the beautiful Wachau area in Austria, where he works and focuses on a special or participate on a big project that deals with a huge historical collection there from a historical perspective. We can also discuss that perhaps at some point if you like. However, today, the focus is the rise of nationalism or Nazism in Austria, in Germany, but yeah, well, both, let's say, and its connections with religion, so its religious aspects, which is an extremely interesting topic to me. As I also am a graduate, I graduated in religious studies, and I partly also focused on this specific area in my past, but I'm not in so much depth as you shall hear from Dr. Schuster. So I'm really looking forward to learn a lot, and I'm grateful to have you here, Dirk, today. Thank you.
Petra, Dobry dzień. Thank you so much. Yes, I will focus in the next few minutes on Germany, but let me say that you can also put these developments in Austria. So in another political circumstance, but it's the same. Yeah.
One more technical thing. I need to say that in the beginning that this is a lecture that is going to be recorded. Maybe you have noticed already. So by being here, you agree with this being recorded, and enjoy. And please do not hesitate to ask questions. I don't know whether you prefer them to interrupt you or the audience to interrupt you, or we shall put all the questions at the end of the lecture. That's up to you. Enjoy, and the floor is yours.
And it's up to you, so you can interrupt me, but you can also collect your questions and we have a discussion at the end. So first, I would like to show you my presentation. I hope so. Please wait. It takes a little bit of time. I'm in home office because in Austria we have lockdown and the internet here is not the best one. So I hope everyone can see.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm pleased to be able to present you today a topic that allows parallels to be drawn with current developments. The rise of National Socialism and its religious background should not be misunderstood. I will not give a lecture on religious language of National Socialism or something like this, but hopefully you will see at the end what I would like to show with the topic, the rise of National Socialism and its religious background. As it's certainly known, one cannot name the one reason that led to the rise of National Socialism in Germany, or the one reason that led to the rise of totalitarian systems in the whole world. Every development has more than one reason, and every shift of a society too. For the rise of the NS, you can read typical reasons like the Versailles Treaty, a failure of condemns German military after 1918, a failure to clean the police after 1918, the hyperinflation in 1923, the fear of communism, especially against the background of the terror of Stalin, which began in the 1920s, a constitution in Germany that could override basic democratic rights too quickly. From 1925, a president like Paul von Hindenburg, who openly rejected democracy, the Great Depression of 1929, and so on, and so on, and so on. So you can read a lot of reasons for the rise of National Socialism. At this point, however, we already encounter a fundamental problem. What about religion? Fortunately, a lot has happened in research over the past 30 years. Nevertheless, we still find very often, especially in church history, the narrative that the two large churches were victims of National Socialism. Either the churches were victims, or if active participation cannot be denied at all, individual church members would have only worked with the Nazis to protect the church. Well, if we believe such statements, I would now be finished with my remarks. But this was not the case. And we must clearly state that denominational conditions and, above all, the initiative of church employees contributed significantly to the rise of National Socialism. Let's just take a look at the following graphic. So hopefully you see the graphic now. Germany is a mixed country in religious spheres, but there are typical areas with clear denominational majorities. The red areas shows us for 1933, the year Hitler came to power, where over 60% of the population was Catholic. Now please draw your attention to the next graphic. Brown shows the areas in which the NSDAP, the Nazi Party, received over 60% of the votes in the elections of March the 5th in 1933. In those areas in the east and in the north were almost exclusively Protestant. The connection that I would like to show you here should become clear relatively quickly. In rural Protestant areas in particular, the Nazis received above average approval in the elections, also in the previous elections. In the following, I would like to try to provide you with a few explanations of why there were such differences in voting behavior between Catholics and Protestants in Germany. First of all, of course, it should be mentioned that the German Catholics had their own political party, which represented the interests of the church, the Center Party. There was no such party on the Protestant side, which is why religious interests could not be drained. The Protestant voter had to look for a party that could do justice to his religious ideas. In addition, since the 19th century, the Catholic milieu had an extensive range of associations, from a choral club to a women's association and its own trade unions, and so on and so on. So it is hardly surprising that in the Protestant areas, the workers tended to follow the Social Democrats, which was much less so in the Catholic areas. Why? A short digression in the time of Luther's Reformation. After the Protestant estates had so here we have such an picture of the trade union of the Catholic milieu. Yeah. After the Protestant estates had renounced the Catholic Church, a completely new church structure had to be built. As an interim solution, it was decided at the beginning of the 16th century that the princes should first be the supreme leaders of the regional church, or to be clear, of the regional churches. This means each small area with a prince had its own regional church. And there, the prince or king was first of all the supreme Protestant bishop. And as it's often the case, what was planned as an interim solution lasts the longest. Until 1918, the respective sovereign prince was the supreme bishop in all 28 Protestant regional churches. You can well imagine that the Protestant churches were therefore very monarchistic. And social ideas of the social democrats about democracy and workers' rights, which would have restricted principal rules, were correspondingly poorly received by the churches at the beginning of the 20th century. While the workers in the Protestant areas therefore turned very strongly to social democracy, this did not happen in the Catholic areas because the Catholic Church has set up its own trade unions which represent the interests of the workers. This enabled the Catholic Church to keep the workers relatively far from social democracy and to maintain its own milieu. As I said, this did not happen in Protestant areas. Since the Protestant regional churches stood on the side of the princes and the kings, and these had no interest in workers' rights, the worker orientated themselves more and more toward social democracy and increasingly distanced themselves from the church. In the Protestant areas, there was already a social division between the bourgeoisie and the workers before 1980, which we cannot observe to such a large extent in the Catholic milieu. And now please remind yourself once again that the Catholic milieu had its own political party, which the Protestant side did not have in this form. In the elections from 1918 onwards, there was no such milieu choice within the Protestant areas as in the Catholic area, as there was no Protestant political representative at all. This is how the developments in Germany from the middle of the 19th century to after the First World War are presented in simple form. But I would like now to direct my focus to the inner Protestant developments in order to be able to show you that there were also developments within religion that promoted the rise of National Socialism. I would like to show you that not only big political or church political decisions can always play a role, especially with German Protestantism. There were massive intra-religious changes in the 19th century that were later to favor the rise of National Socialism. This would like to illustrate with an empirical example from Thuringia in the middle of Germany. If you don't know where Thuringia is, no problem, you shouldn't know. That so-called German Christian Church movement, or die Kirchenbewegung Deutsche Christen. This was an internal church organization which saw a connection between Christianity and National Socialism and saw in Hitler the instrument of God, the Führer or leader sent by God. This may also make a little clearer why National Socialism was able to achieve such successes, especially in the Protestant milieu, as we could see on the graphics that I show you. The example I have chosen is certainly an extreme example. However, Peter Ulrich, in his new study on the Protestant church in Mecklenburg, it's on the border with Poland on the German Baltic Sea coast, Mecklenburg, Ulrich Peter showed that there were similar tendencies there too. So we today know that in 1931, more than half of the Protestant pastors in Bavaria and in Mecklenburg were sympathizers of Hitler, more than 50%. But let's first look back to the 19th century once again. The emergence of a German national consciousness, which developed since the end of the 18th century and which received additional impetus from the so-called unification wars between 1864 and 1871, was closely linked to the German Protestantism from the start. As a result of the victories over the Catholic Austrians and the Catholic France in 1866 and 1871, a new kingdom emerged under Prussian Protestant domination, in which Protestantism finally turned to German nationalism and became an elementary part of the political national conservative thinking. Immediately after the unification of the German territorial states to the German Reich in 1871, an appeal was issued. The idea of a unification of all Germans, which had been prevailed since 1948, should be implemented under the new political conditions. So Protestant and Catholic faith should be reunified, of course, under the dominance of Protestantism. So that was the thinking after the creation of the new German Reich. In parts of German Protestantism, ideas solidified in the following decades, which were primarily directed against ideas of the Enlightenment: liberalism, individualism, democracy, and the ongoing socialism ideas. With the outbreak of World War I, the anti-Enlightenment ideas within Protestantism were given an folkish wing in the form of an aggressive approval and glorification of war. Folkish in German, means a worldview which glorifies their own national, their own nation, their own national identity, and his people, the folk, on the basis of racist arguments. So folk means here people from the origin, ethnic background, for example, not Jews of all, for example. Of course, folkish means a little bit more, but I do not want to go in detail at this point. Nation and people, so people means the folk, increasingly found their way into the Christian faith. For example, in the idea that the Germans were the new people of God, folk of God, instead the people of Israel. As a result, an increasingly national religious fundamentalism arose within German Protestantism. This was fed by elements of the divine as well as the profane, such as people, folk, nation, Reich, and Germanism, Deutschtum. Folkish Christian ideas within the Protestant churches, which has developed since the beginning of the 20th century, were, however, something absolutely new, whereby the concepts were based on the ideas of the national Protestants. It was more than just a Germanization of the Christian faith and its organizations. Those protagonists who committed themselves to a Germanization of church and religion on the basis of racial ideas at the beginning of the 20th century can be understood as forerunners of the German Christian church movement. This movement I will explain you in a few minutes. However, the understanding of faith of this movement was not exclusively mere further development of such ethnic Christian conceptions. The new was it was only the connection of these already existing anti-Semitic German ideas of Christianity with the ideology of National Socialism, which was formed as the new point of this German Christian church movement, but only the connections with a political idea, in this case, the political idea of National Socialism. That was the new. All other ideas, German belief system, anti-Semitism, and so on, inside Protestantism was not new. This arose at the end of the 19th century, at the beginning of the 20th century. So, the fact that Protestant representatives had already spread ideas of a German Christianity before and during the First World War, and as a result founded internal church organizations to implement such ideas, is important for the assessment and classification of the German Christian church movement. Their rise is on the one hand directly linked to the success of the Nazis as a political movement. On the other hand, they also benefit from increasingly racist thought within German-speaking Protestantism, which found their way into the belief system since the beginning of the 20th century. And of course, the Hitler Party profited also from the rise of such racist faith ideas, as I will show you later. In order to understand the later internal church success of inner Protestant church organizations with a racist and anti-Semitic belief system, it is necessary to look at the developments in German Protestantism since the turn of the century. So what was happened since 1900? Immediately before the outbreak of World War I, an organization was founded in Vienna under the name of Friends of the Protestant People Church, to which pastors and lay people alike belonged. With the aim of creating a truly German Protestant national church, this group combined a Christian community formation in which the form behind the content, the unity behind true Christian freedom, the letter behind the spirit, every kind of priesthood and pastoralism has to take second place to the general priesthood. And general priesthood means the folk, the people. We perceive all phenomena that work on the opposite sense of Catholic, even if they appear in Protestant garb. In addition to the restrictions of church bureaucracy and many more, there was also a plan for a complete racial division of the Protestant Church of Austria in a German and a Slavic organizational structure. In addition, there was a call for the principles of the Lutheran Reformation to be further developed and for racial ideas to flow into Christian teaching. So here in 1914 in Austria, we can also see that the ideas grow up to create a national racist ideas-based church. In the German Empire, there were similarly sounding ideas of a national or species-specific Christianity. So, I hope you can all see the slides. Even before the First World War, the Protestant pastor Arthur Bonus published the book on the Germanization of Christianity. In it, Bonus demanded that Christianity, as a religion that is actually foreign to the German character. I don't know what a German character means, but okay, should only be interpreted nationally. Luther had already started this with his Reformation, said Bonus, in order to develop a genuinely German national religion. However, Christianity had to undergo renewed Germanization and nationalization. Also, the four authors and pastors, Friedrich Andersen, Ernst Katzer, and so on and so on, their names are not that important, argued in a similar way in their proclamation for a German Christianity, with which they, in 1917, on the 400th anniversary of Luther's Reformation, went public. These four authors also understood the Reformation as not over, a fact that must now be concluded. Luther got with the Reformation, the first huge step was taken towards the liberation of the German people from alien spiritual spell, Catholicism. Bismarck the second by making it politically measured. The third, we all have to do ourselves by Germanization Christianity in ourselves. Behind the term Germanization of Christianity hid first and foremost an anti-Semitic view of the world, which was to be incorporated into Christianity. The four authors pleaded for the complete disregard of the Old Testament in the liturgy and sermon, and interpreted Jesus as a racial non-Jew who may even had an Aryan origin. So here, during the time of the First World War, we find the ideas, and these ideas were very popular during this time in Germany, that Jesus was an Aryan. So these ideas of these racial class system with Aryans and so on was not new. Not Hitler created such ideas. It was during the First World War also present inside the Protestant church milieu, inside Protestant thinking by pastors, and so on and so on and so on. So therefore, the connections between Christianity and the Old Testament should be broken quickly, they said. After the end of the First World War and the political reorganization of Germany as a democratic republic, the Bund für Deutsche Kirche, so Association for a German Church, was established in 1921 as the first major union within the German Christian spectrum. In addition to pastors, many educators, religion teachers, and students of theology belonged to this Bund. And here we can already see why such associations should have a lasting impact on the whole society, or on the Protestant part of the society. Teachers and pastors are multipliers. A single person can reach many other people without much ado, during the church service, in parental consulting hours, or directly in interaction with the children. And please note the completely different circumstances at this time. At this time, in the 1920s, pastors and teachers were still considered authorities. It's hardly to understand nowadays, but at this time it was. In the course of the 1920s, when Hitler's party had not yet played a relevant role, members were already able to move into various church parliaments. This was done through elections in the individual parishes. So, and from this we can already see that racist ideas have already found their way into society at a lower level. If one reads frequently that the Great Depression of 1929 in particular helped Hitler to rise, then is certainly true, yes, of course. But even before that, groups like the Bund für Deutsche Kirche were able to establish themselves with their ideas within society. Such groups, especially on a religious level, where one could reach many people, have already laid the certain foundation stone. And it was similar in Thuringia, with which I would like to come to my final example. Two young pastors, Julius Leuthäuser and Siegfried Leffler, uprooted by the First World War, came into contact with Hitler's party in 1925, where at this time nobody knows outside of Bavaria. So during this time, the Hitler party was still completely insignificant, as I told you. In 1927, 2 years later, they went to East Thuringia as pastors, a region where the Social Democrats had many supporters. So it was a typical working area, workers' area. Leffler and Leuthäuser perceived the exciting church conditions as rigid and unworldly, which meant that the normal church members could not longer be reached. Instead of theological debates, Leffler and Leuthäuser rely on lasting truths, especially among young people and school teachers, with the help of community activities and political discussion events. To this end, Leffler and Leuthäuser founded a group of pastors and teachers, as I told you, in their new Thuringian sphere of activity, with whom they intended to advance their one-side mission. And this organization was the inner Protestant German Christian Church movement, which I mentioned before. Recitals, lectures, men's consultations, leisure activities, etc., etc. So a lot of activities were organized and on the one hand, and to bring the local population back to the church, and on the other hand, to be able to advertise National Socialism too. In 1928, only 1 year later, the two pastors organized a trip with their still small group to Glauchau in Saxony, nobody had to know, for the first time to listen to a speech of Hitler. When characterizing the circle around Leffler and Leuthäuser with their diverse activities, it is absolutely correct to follow the famous church historian Klaus Scholder. Scholder characterized this group as an ideal, typical form of an ethnic or folkish Christian movement. In the group of Leffler and Leuthäuser, so Scholder, there was no longer any differences between church, cultural, and political work because everything happened from one spirit and served the same goal, the Christian folkish renewal of the German nation. And as a consequence, the decision was made to found a local Nazi party group from the growing circus of pastors and teachers, which happened in early 1929. So it was a very short time, only 2 years from when they arrived in Thuringia to found inner Protestant church organization, to found their own branch of the Nazi party. The now almost daily events in communities outside of the original sphere of activities secured units of the Sturmabteilung, it was the military arm of the Nazi party, as there were more violent clashes with the social democratic supporters, and especially Leuthäuser and Leffler as pastors started fighting or beating democratic supporters. In addition to torchlight marches, in which especially composed battle songs with Christian content were sung. The lectures by Loeffler and Leutheiser in particular formed the basis for the group's further expansion throughout East Thuringia. At the same time, the group took over a large part of the party propaganda for the Nazi party in the area of East Thuringia, especially in the rural communities. In addition to the personal enthusiasm of Loeffler and Leutheiser, and this is only an example, I can give you a lot of more examples of such group activities from pastors. It was the propagated connection between German Christianity and National Socialism, as well as the close cooperation between village pastors and teachers that led to the increasing success of the Thuringian German Christians of this group and the Nazi party in this region. In the elections for representation in the parish of the city Altenburg, the church parliament of the region, of course, the group won almost 30% of the votes in the year 1931. 30% are in 1931, that means 4 years after the group was founded by these two young guys. And in the church elections in Thuringia in January 1933, even before Hitler came to power, this church movement was the strongest fraction in the church parliament of Thuringia. So 6 years after founding the biggest movement. I came to my conclusion. We are all familiar with voting in favor of an extremist organization as an opportunity to protest, yes, to show the elite how we feel. So we know these voting, especially in Germany, after also in Czech and so on. So this protest voting potential. And there were also such voters for the Nazi party, so protest voters. The Hitler party lost more than 2 million voters in the elections of 1932. Such protest behavior can, however, less be accepted as the main motivation in election to church parliaments. A church parliament did not have the opportunity to fundamentally redesign everyday things. The institution of the church had to continue to operate within the framework of state laws and, moreover, could not make any fundamental change in its own constitution. In other words, a church parliament cannot change the religious doctrine. For a not insignificant proportion of the voters of the Bund für Deutsche Kirche, this first example, or the German Christian church movement from Loeffler and Leutheiser, it can be assumed that the vote for such group was not made out of mere protest, but out of conviction. In this conviction, which we find in large parts of the German Protestant milieu, prepared Hitler on the way to power. I'm not saying that the radicalization of Protestantism was the main point in Hitler's rise to power, but a religious glorification of Germanness, open anti-Semitism in large parts of the pastors, the fundamental rejection of democracy. This was the ground on which National Socialism could also grow easily. And as I said several times, Thuringia is just one example. We can find this in almost all Protestant areas in Germany in the late 1920s. So I hope you are still here, not sleep. And yes, thank you for your attention.
Dirk, thank you very much. Thank you for a fantastic lecture, very interesting. Thanks a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, a lot of thinking going on in the minds of the audience. So this is time where we can have a common discussion. You can raise your ideas, questions, share with us, and we can, Dr. Schuster can react, and we can have a conversation. So please go ahead if there are questions. I've got a lot of questions, but I would first like to leave the space, provide the space to the others. Anybody question? So I shall start. My question is, how come that the Protestant Church is still, or has been still, so strong? It didn't. What happened? What you just described in depth to us? This connection between this relationship, mutual fooling of Protestantism and Nazism through the idea of racism, basically. How come this all didn't delegitimize the Protestant Church in Germany? It's still very strong there. Yeah.
So that's first of all, you have to think about that. Yes, there's no world church of Protestantism, of course. So that means that the Protestants in Germany can easily found their own way to God and can easily combine this religious belief system with some kinds of nationalism. So, of course, Luther made his Reformation in Germany. Luther was German. So why not? Why shouldn't be the Germans the people of God? So that was the thinking, and so.
So was
then,
it perhaps? Sorry.
please, please.
Was it perhaps the case, as you rightly said, Protestantism has a totally different structure than Catholicism? There is no hierarchy with the Pope at the top. So perhaps is it the case that after the Second World War, it was just the authority, the concrete people, concrete authorities, the pastors, individual pastors who were blamed?
Yes, yes. So it was not development from up to down. It was a development from the basic. So and not every pastor have such ideas, but the next problem was that the Protestants were the majority. So as a majority, we all know from huge kind of research about majorities and minorities. A majority very quickly starts to create ideas of an unity of the folk, of the people, of the nation, to create a unity that is under the whole control of the majority. So we find it very often, especially in the 19th and early 20th century. You have to look at the Balkans and the new national states. So, and this came also as part of this development in German Protestantism, that these majority thinking. We are the best one. We are the best for the country. Because we stood in the roots of Luther, and then the roots of Bismarck, and so on and so on. So this was a development which grew up and grew up and grew up, combined with nationalism, with racism, and no hierarchical order like a pope can intervene. can interrupt to say, stop, that's has nothing to do with Christianity. So, because there was not such a great organization or authority who can say stop. The great authority was the king. He was the leader. The King of Prussia was the leader of the whole Protestants in Prussia. So, and why he should stop this development?
Another thing that I would like to ask you about is, and we shall stay in this area and focusing at the topic of racism here, because it's crucial, right? To my knowledge, there has been, apart from this hugely, this big influence of Protestantism, where this idea of racism was implemented already, or present already, we know that there has been other religious resources for this, esoteric Eastern religions and traditions. Could you perhaps elaborate a bit more on that? Because there seems to be, according to the research, a direct influence, and perhaps not that the Eastern and esoteric religions would be in favor, or but it seems that the Nazis have been digging and creating, implementing artificially these ideas into these Eastern traditions. Is it? Could you perhaps?
Yes, I wouldn't say that the Nazis communicated in an active way, because it was a development before the so-called Völkisch movement in the early 20th century. So yes, ideas of Buddhism came to Germany in 1903. The first branch of Buddhism was founded in Leipzig. And yes, the swastika came to Germany, for example. And then the ideas of Miss Blavatsky from the Theosophical Society, with very strong race system. So this I don't know the English word, Wurzelrasse. So about the theosophical ideas of Miss Blavatsky, also based on racist thinking, and also then the ideas of Rudolf Steiner from the anthroposophy, and so on and so on. So that was a mixture inside these very heterogeneous Völkisch movement in the early 1920s. And some parts of the Nazi elite, for example, Heinrich Himmler, were very interested in such ideas, and put some kinds. My cell phone is also sorry. Have a strong look at these some kinds of these the other parts of the Nazi elite, like Hitler, for example, have nothing to do with such ideas, but it was a mixture that also create new kinds of nationalism, new kinds of spiritualism. And this also influenced these young church members like Leuser and Leffler, and so it was a time of very strong changing of society. So also during this time, the first organizations of drink no alcohol, bioculture, and so were founded. So it was a very changing a time of change in some kinds of society. So
yeah. Still, yeah, as you say, it was surely very syncretic in terms of different religious resources. Yeah, there was also, we need to mention also the Germanic paganism, yeah, or neo-paganism, and so on and so forth. But do you think that can the interpretation of this making use of these aspects of these religious elements, can we say that the Nazis were misusing and misinterpreting these religious resources actually?
I don't think so, because especially Hitler had no interest in religious topics. Absolutely not. And these neo-paganism organizations, yeah, they are very loud, but have only around about 2,000 members. And there are a lot of organizations with only 20 members, with 40 members. So they are very small, but very loud. So some kind of the Nazi elites were member of such organizations, and then parts of the church also combine. For example, they have the idea that Wotan and Jesus are the same person. It's only an example. So, and in this example, you can see that these ideas from this neo-paganism came in some small parts into the churches. So, and then these pastors and so on and church members bring these ideas in society. So I would not say that the Nazis were these active parts who bring these ideas in society, or so this was outside from the Nazi movement, but a good combination with the Nazi movement.
All right. Are there any questions from the audience, please? Any comments?
Critics.
You can raise criticism as well. Okay, well then I will make use of the time and space and ask you one more question. You're talking about the rise of National Socialism in Germany, and we would be blind not to see that there's been a rise of the extreme right thinking, let's say, in current Europe, in today's Europe. Recently. We've got numbers from elections in different states which demonstrate that. Could you perhaps comment comparatively maybe on the situation then and now? Can you trace some similarities? Are we in danger?
So yes, so we have a lot of similarities. For example, with Hungary. So Hungary, as the protector of Europe, as protector of the Christian Europe, especially Viktor Orban brings this ideas very often in interviews and so on. And for Hungary, we have also these examples where pastors promoted Viktor Orban for his ideas, for his national ideas, and the anti-Semitic ideas of Viktor Orban, everyone knows. So we have here the same combination from political far-right ideas with Christian ideas of protection, of start a new reformation. That's a bit too far, but start a new re-Christianization of Europe. And especially, and for example, you have also at every point you have an enemy. In the 1920s, of course, this was the Jew. Today is also the Jew, especially in Hungary, but more it's the Muslim, the Islam. So you need an enemy. So, and we have also, when you think about Erdogan, in Turkey.
Mhm.
So these rise of nationalism in combination with religious ideas. So only in Turkey we have these right Islam thinking. So it's not right that women can go to a university. It's not right that women shows their hairs, and this is why the society became more and more boring. Become more. So we have this very often in interviews from Erdogan, and the enemy, yes, of course, is Europe. And you can also find it in Poland. This ruling party.
It's with the combination of Catholic Church, right?
Yes, yes. So it's not a kind of it's only a kind of Protestantism.
Mhm.
You can find it very often, and you also have it in Myanmar, for example, with Buddhism.
Mhm.
So this combination from far right ideas with religion, it's very often, and this is a combination with is, I think it's very, very dangerous because it's very, very dangerous because it's not only a political idea. A political idea, especially in a democratic system, you can, yeah, you can vote for or you cannot vote for. But if you combine it with religious ideas, so it's have the will by God, for example, not in Buddhism, I know, but so it's not that easy to destroy such ideas with arguments, because, for example, in Poland, it's very difficult to destroy arguments of Catholic ideas of anti-Semitism in Poland, which use the political ruling party for their aims. So it's very difficult because then you have to think about the religious system and so on, and argument against the religious system.
Sorry. I have to ask everyone to turn off the microphone if they don't have any question. Yeah, please. Got a new audience, Robert Neisser. Please turn off the microphone. Thank you very much. Unless you have a question, of course, which is always very welcome. Thanks for your answer. Yeah, just a short reaction. Yeah, I really like that you can introduce us, and then you can let us see that in this comparative perspective that this can be going on in different religious political systems. Yeah, this is that's very useful to see, necessary to see as well. Are there any questions in the audience? Reactions, comments?
Yeah, maybe I have one question. I heard that the nowadays Satanism is based on Nazism in some way. Even when was Hitler in power, there were something like a secret group of people called Order of Saturn. So I won't, or I don't know what I can think about it, because I don't know that in the Hitler's government were some space for Satanism or something like this, but in nowadays radical Satanists are based on Nazism and these ideas. So it's my question for you. What do you think about it?
Thank you for a question, Christoph. So, and thank you. That's a very typical example. After the war, after the Second World War, only 2 years after the Second World War, the churches started to publish the first books about the churches as enemies of National Socialism. So the first one who published a book 2 years after the Second World War, okay, he was party member of the NSDAP, of the Nazi Party, since 1923. Okay, And in this after-war period, we can read very, very often that, yeah, the Nazis were neo-pagans, they were satans, and so on, and they wanted to destroy the churches. So, and of course, that was a plan that, because everyone knows, especially in the churches, that church members, especially pastors, played a not that famous role during the Third Reich. And that's why these narratives of Nazis wanted to destroy the churches, Satanists, and so on, became after the World War very famous, because it was, yes, you can say it was a propaganda of the churches after the Second World War. So, but you can very easily ask, over 600 churches were built during the 12 years of the Nazis in Germany. In no time during the whole time of Germany, so many churches were built in such a short period. So I would ask, if Satanists would build churches, over 600. So hopefully I can explain you that this was a propaganda line of some church historians after the Second World War. So we have, of course, Heinrich Himmler. He was a little bit spiritual, also with neo-paganism, but it was not Himmler. It was not a full program. So he, every time, oh, that's interesting. Oh, yes, I could be part of Heinrich the First from the Middle Ages, and so on and so on. His thinking was very strange. So we have Alfred Rosenberg, who was also this way, but Rosenberg was not part of the elite. Since 1933, he wasn't part of the elite of the Nazi elite anymore. So yes, you have different religious thinkings inside the Nazi elite, but absolutely no Satanists.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other question out there? Please go ahead if you like. Questions? No questions? Well, Dirk, I need to ask you one more thing. The way you describe things is the way to, is a full secularization a way to make sure this is not going to happen, or to make sure these things won't happen again? Because what you seem to be saying is that the connection of extreme right politics and elitist religious ideas is the danger. Yeah, is the real disconnection, is creates the real danger. So if we try to make it, to prevent this connection between extreme right politics, political ideas, and elitist religious ideas, can we prevent this sort of thing, as you've been talking about Nazism and its rise in Germany? Can we prevent this or not?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because I wrote an article with a colleague from University of Vienna, and we had a look at the last European value studies, the data. And all the most secularized region in the world is the eastern part of Germany, the former GDR, and the country with the highest rate of secularization is the Czech Republic. So, and these are two areas which are very, very intolerant, or the population is very intolerant. So we had a look at the connections between intolerance. So, for example, the question, I don't like as neighbors Muslims or Jews, in connections with the religious belief, self-believing. So I'm religious, I believe in God, and these whole questions. So, and it's very interesting that in these two areas, the Czech Republic and the former GDR, the rate of intolerance is very, very high.
Yeah, the xenophobia is really high. Yeah, as you said, I can confirm.
So, and that is a point which I want to make clear. It's not the one reason. So it's a connection. So when you think the Czech Republic have a very special history in religion. So very, very special. So part of the Habsburg monarchy, part of Austria. So then with Jan Hus and Catholicization in the 17th century, and so on, and so on, and so on. So you have to think, you have to look at these developments, and then the developments in the 20th century, and especially in the developments in the last 30 years, because we have a new revolution inside society, because mass media.
Mm-hmm.
So and you have to look there. So you can't say then if we were all atheists, then we have a very friendly thinking for each other and so on. No, absolutely not. But religion could or can be one part that helps to rise far-right movements to come to power. But it develops, it depends on the historical and backgrounds and the role of society and the changes in society at the moment.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the audience? Comments? Okay, if not, I shall thank you very much, Dirk, for your wonderful presentation and a very interesting discussion as well. I'm sure we all enjoyed it very much, and also we look forward to. In the last bit, you said you were talking about this connection of atheism and local politics and so on, and I know I know that this is what you're looking at in case of the Czech Republic and its last decades. So I can't wait to hear more about it, perhaps in your next lecture. And thank you very much once again, and all the best to everyone. Stay healthy and stay well. Thank you.
And hopefully see you soon in live, not via internet.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you.